So, do you want
All
to
right.
start or should I?
Go ahead, Raju. Or do you need a couple minutes, Raju? Okay. So we start by asking a simple question. Would you please prove a single hadith for us?
Why do I have to prove one hadith when I could prove most of them? There's actually a very
That's
simple
okay.
reason.
You can start. You can start with proving one of them.
Okay, I'll make an argument for this. I'll start with an argument. So, when you look at historical scholarship, for instance, biblical scholarship or really any other historical scholarship, one of the main criteria that are used for authenticity is the criteria of dissimilarity. Basically, if someone is reporting something that is not in their interest to report, or that makes them look bad, or that does not benefit them, then that thing is more likely to be true. This criteria is used again and again in biblical scholarship. I'm not saying something controversial here. When we apply this criteria to the Islamic historical records, what we find is most of the things mentioned in the Hadith and Sirah are actually proven by this criteria, because there are numerous things in Islamic historical records that simply would not have been made up. I'll just give one example of this, and this is an argument for the reliability of isnads. When we look at the isnads, most of the isnads reporting hadith of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what we find is that vast majority of them are coming from younger companions, such as Abu Huraira radiallahu anhu. A fabricator would not have picked younger companions to make up hadith from. They would have chosen the older companions who spent a large time with Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This shows, since these isnads are unlikely to be fabricated, this shows they are reliable, and hence this is powerful evidence for reliability of hadith. You can respond.
Yeah, that still doesn't prove a single hadith. You can use that to say it's more likely, but now you're just basing your information on probabilistic knowledge. So probabilistic knowledge is dhan. Dhan is condemned in the Quran, chapter 6, verse 116. Therefore, we cannot prove a single hadith using this methodology. So do you have any other methodology?
Let me respond to this.
Sorry, Amar, just one thing. When we're talking about isnads, because you're talking about the reliability of isnads as well, there are narrations that say that isnads were later used, right? So, for example, I dropped a hadith in VC1-chat that says, Abu Jafar Muhammad bin Usaba narrated to us, Ismail bin Zakaria narrated to us, on the authority of Asim al-Ahwal, on the authority of Ibn Sirin, that he said they would not ask about the chains of narrations, and when the fitna occurred, they said, name for us your man. So Ahlul Sunnah would be regarded, and their hadith were then taken, and Ahlul Bidah would be regarded, and their hadith were not taken. So you see, as you can see in this narration, isnads weren't collected until later. They weren't seen as a source of reliability until later, till the second fitna.
Okay, since 2 points were made, one by Naveed and one by Jonathan, I'll have to respond to both of them. Firstly, Naveed was saying that he was bringing an ayat of the Quran that it's done and it's not certain. Firstly, if you are going to bring up your interpretations of the Quran, they are irrelevant. Your personal opinion or my personal opinion is irrelevant. Seriously, why would anyone take your personal opinion on this topic seriously? We have differences of opinion in this regard. Why would I prefer yours, or why would I accept yours without any reason? Firstly,
okay, give me a neutral translation of that verse, 6:116.
There is no neutral translation. And by the way, there's one more problem with this. You are taking ayat of the Quran out of context. We have to look at the context. For the context, we have to go through the Sirah and the Hadith. So that point doesn't work. Now, let me just respond to Jonathan's point, and then then you can respond. Jonathan's point was that isnad came later. Firstly, if we look at the narration of Ibn Sirin, right, there's a difference of opinion regarding its interpretation, what is meant by it as the fitna. For instance, Junbol's argument, and this is basically something that there is a consensus of Orientalists on, that this refers to the fitna of Ibn al-Zubair. This consensus is wrong, and there is a very simple reason for this. There is an early text called Kitab al-Irja. It's also called Risala al-Hasan ibn Muhammad al-Hanafiya. This is an Umayyad text. This is earlier than any text Junbal is using for his argument, or any Orientalist uses for their arguments. This text mentions the fitna, and it refers to the fitna that happened after the time of Uthman Raziyallahu anhu. So this text, this early text, is confirming the position of Sunni scholars that Isnad began after the time of the fitna of Uthman Raziyallahu anhu. So this quote doesn't help you, and again, this actually shows how weak the consensus of Orientalists is. You can respond.
Yeah, the point that you made that it was a consensus is actually false, because Motsky claims the exact opposite. He says studies have shown that the custom of asking one's teacher about their informants arose at the end of the 1st century Hijra and then slowly spread in the course of the 2nd century Hijra in Mecca. Asking about an isnad didn't begin until the start of the 2nd century in Iraq, even later. Right? So like, you're bringing up Orientalists like Yoinbal, and saying that this is somehow a consensus, but obviously that's not true. Go ahead, Amar.
Okay, I didn't call this a consensus. You know who calls this a consensus? Joshua Little. Go watch his video, the 21 arguments video. He says there is a consensus of Orientalists on this. And secondly, you brought up Modsky. Here's the thing you need to keep in mind. The opinion of any Orientalist, Modsky included, is irrelevant, and I'll give a very simple reason why. When we look at biblical scholars, right, such as Bart Ehrman, Dale Martin, etc., they are willing and able to defend their arguments against Christians, people who are motivated to challenge them. This is why they have credibility. Orientalists, any Orientalists never debate Muslims. They are too scared to debate Muslims. Why would we give any of their works credibility if they cannot defend their arguments? Why should they be taken seriously? Firstly. Secondly, you did not respond to my argument. My argument is based on the narration of Ibn Sirin, Rahmatullah alayh. That narration is exactly the thing Orientalists, Modsky included, and Muslims both used to argue for reliability of Isnad. So you did not address this argument. You did not address the point about younger Sahaba and the fact that fabricators would not have made up narrations from them. Kindly address those arguments, and then we can move on. You can respond.
Yeah, the point about the younger Sahaba, we know that these people fabricated their death dates in order to elongate their connections to Isnad. Right? This is something that's well known. But we have Sahaba dying at the age of like 97, sometimes surpassing even 100. Right? Anas ibn Malik, if I'm not mistaken, died at like 97 years old, which is inconceivable for their time frame. Right? So this is just evidence that, you know, relying on death dates and their time periods of when they were alive in order to connect them to the Prophet is just irrelevant. Right? And on top of this, when you look at the Sahaba, the contention isn't that, oh, they're younger Sahaba and so they can connect it to the Prophet, right? Like Abu Huraira was brought up. Abu Huraira joined the movement relatively late, right? And on top of that, when you look at these narrations, the contention isn't that it's the Sahaba narrating it, right? Many of the contentions are it's people claiming that the Sahaba are narrating it, right? With the inventions of the common link fabrications and such, right? But I'm sure you're already aware of this because you know Orientalist work. And you're kind of attacking scholars by saying that they're scared to debate. It's not that they're scared to debate. Their goal isn't to debate. They don't debate. That's not their main purpose. They do research and they come out with their research, right? And they explain, this is what I found, this is what I discussed. But you're saying, oh, they don't want to debate Muslims. That's not their job. That's polemicists' jobs, right? If you want to debate, you go to people who adhere to these faiths and debate them. That's not the job of a researcher who does research as a living, or who teach at universities, or who just, they're not polemicists, is the point I was trying to make. I don't know.
Okay, there are multiple points, so I'll have to respond to each of them, right? The first point was that the contention is that the younger Sahaba narrating Hadith, right? This is not a contention. This is actually an argument for reliability of Hadith, and I'll quote Modsky on this topic since you brought him up. This is a reference from Hadith Origins and Development. I think this chapter is from Modsky, I'm not sure, but it is on page 174. One other matter may be referred to briefly. Western scholars have often pointed out that the companions most commonly quoted as authority for traditions are the younger ones rather than those who followed the Prophet ﷺ for his Meccan days, right? Uh, then he gives a list of how many hadith Sahaba reporting. After that, he says, this dependence on younger companions has often been brought forward as an argument against the veracity of traditionists. But as Professor Fuke has pointed out, it is rather an argument for their veracity. If all isnads were invented, it would have been easy to produce isnads from early companions in profusion. So this is the first argument, first response to the point regarding younger Sahaba. Secondly, you brought up the point about ages of scholars, and those are basically fabricated. This is Junbul's argument. Now, there are major problems with this. First problem is that there is nothing unlikely or impossible about these ages being old. And you don't have to take my word on this. Go to Modsky's review of Junbul's Encyclopedia of Canonical Hadith. I think it's a 12-page short review, 12 pages. You can find it on Academia. And there he says that there is nothing problematic about these ages. There's an even bigger problem with this contention, Junbul's argument. Here's the thing. Junbul was basing his argument on a study done on ages of Hadith scholars by a scholar named Richard Bulliet. You can find this on JSTOR. It's not difficult to find. Here's what Richard Bulliet says in his study. Give me one moment. I'll quote his reference. I'll quote his exact words because this is a really important argument.
Alright, please keep going. What are we talking about?
You brought up the argument regarding ages of Hadith scholars. Okay, I'll quote Richard Bulliet in this regard. This is from his, the paper is called A Quantitative Approach to Medieval Muslim Biographical Dictionaries. This is a short reference, let me just read it. On the basis of 150 biographies in which both birth and death dates are supplied, it can be affirmed that the average lifespan of the individual in these two works was 78 years. As these are lunar years, however, a correction must be made for solar reckoning, and this correction yields an average lifespan of 75 solar years. And this is the important part, keep this in mind, and this is what would be expected of a group of men, all of whom survived infancy and childhood and who did not have to cope with cigarette smoking, air pollution, military service, and nervous tension born of modern life. So the scholar who studied Junbul is using, he himself says that there is nothing unusual about the ages of Sunni scholars. And one more thing I would like to point out. In Junbul's argument, he claims that the ages of Sunni scholars are far greater than the ages of modern man living in the West. This is a lie, and I'll give one reference for this. The average age, according to Bulliet, was 75 years, right? You can check Demographic Yearbook 1989 of United Nations. This is a mainstream source. Anyone can go check this. The average average lifespan of people in Iceland was 74.58. In Sweden, it was 74.16. In Switzerland, it was 73.9. So this is pretty close to what the ages of Sunni scholars are. So one thing, so the second point exposes the lie of Junbul, and the first point shows there is nothing wrong with the ages of Sunni scholars. In fact, these are the ages that would be expected.
Stop.
Okay, I finished my point. You can respond.
You said the average age? No, you have to go point by point. You can, you keep reading all this stuff and we get lost. Just go point by point.
So I addressed multiple points.
United Nations?
I gave a reference for this. One moment. You can check Demographic Yearbook 1989, United Nations.
Okay. And why are you comparing 1989 to 7th century Quraysh?
Because this was Junbul's claim. Junbul claimed that the ages of these scholars are far more than what a modern Western person has. This was his claim. I am refuting his claim that these ages are far more than that. Firstly,
even if you say it was equal or close, that's still problematic because we have the modern medicine, which did not exist 1,000 years ago, 1,200, 300 years ago. So even if it's closed, that's still a big problem. How
Actually,
could
it's
these
not a
people
big
live
problem.
75 years? The Prophet himself lived 63 years.
You can finish your point, then I'll continue. Okay, finish your point.
Yeah, that was my point. I'm saying even if it's closed, that's still a problem because we have modern medicine in this age. This did not exist back in the day.
Okay, firstly, if we have modern medicine, we also have cigarette smoking, air pollution, military service, and nervous tension in these things. But you don't have to take my word on any of this. There is nothing unusual about this,
No,
and
that's
the
fine.
reason is just let me finish this point. The reason there is nothing unusual about this is that the scholar who did this study, a scholar named Richard Bulliet, Junebul's argument is based on this study. You can look this up, you don't have to take my word on any of this. That scholar himself is saying, and this in fact is what would be expected of a group of men, all of whom survived infancy and childhood and who did not have to cope with these things. There is nothing
Why are you
unusual
going
about
off
these
Yuanbo's
ages.
argument? Why don't you just attack our argument?
You are
You're
making
talking about
Junebul's
Yuanbo. I
argument.
didn't quote Yuanbo for that.
You are making his argument, that's why I'm addressing it. You are saying there is
Yeah, but
something unusual
I'm
about
not
this.
making his claims.
You are saying there is something unusual
You're
about these
speaking to me
ages.
as if I'm Yuanbo. I'm not
Okay, you
Yuanbo.
can finish your point, then I'll reply. Finish your point.
No. I'm just clarifying. Plus, on top of that, you're saying Orientalists don't want to debate Muslims, and you're attacking Orientalists, and then you go to Orientalists for these claims. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Your framework is off.
Okay. Now I'll address both points. Firstly, I addressed earlier the points about Orientalists because you are bringing them as authority. Keep this in mind. And you said that their job is not to debate. Of course, their job is to debate and defend these arguments. This is what biblical scholars do, like Bart Ehrman, Dale Allison, and John Dominic Crossan, Dale Martin, etc. Biblical scholars are doing this again and again. They have credibility because they are defending their
Are we
arguments.
talking about biblical scholars?
Jonathan, let me finish my point. Yeah, I'll let you finish your point. Let me finish my point. Here's the thing, this is a valid comparison. One group of scholars are defending their arguments. The reason they have credibility is because they can defend their arguments against people motivated to challenge them. Orientalists are not doing this. They are not defending any of their claims. Why should anyone take them seriously? Secondly, the entire argument, right? Your entire argument, because you are getting this argument from June Bull, you did not do a study regarding ages of scholar yourself. The argument is based on the ages of Sunni scholars being unusual. I quoted the exact scholar who Junbul used, who did the study on the ages of Sunni scholars, and he is saying there is nothing unusual about these ages. This is why you don't have an argument. Now, you can respond to the both points.
There really isn't a response because you're not dealing with me. You're dealing with Orientalists. I didn't claim Orientalist argument. I just said these ages for these Hadith transmitters are unusually long. These people live until 97, 98, 99, 100. And then you point to, well, Yunpo says this, and this is why he's wrong. I'm not Yunpo, right? Don't deal with his argument, deal with mine. And
okay, I'll deal with your argument. I'll deal with your argument.
Say it again.
I'll deal with your argument.
Okay.
Firstly,
then
the
ahead.
average age is not 97, 98, 99, 100. Average age is 75. Unless you want to do your own study where you bring the ages of Sunni scholars and you take the average of them, you will have to go by this study. This is the average age. Now your argument is basically you are claiming there is something unusual about these ages, right? This is your argument. Why is there something unusual about these ages? Can you give any evidence for this? Because if we go by the studies done on this topic, there is nothing unusual about this. So if your argument is separate from those studies, it's your argument based on your assumptions regarding these ages being unusual. Go ahead, give some evidence for that is independent of those studies. Because if you can't, then your argument doesn't stand.
Yeah, it's simple. We have, like Sajjad claimed, we have modern medicine. And even then, it's hard for someone to even get up to 97 with the modern medicine. And yeah, I'm supposed to believe that 7th century Arabs are able to hit these ages consistently? Specifically, the Hadith transmitters? That's hard to believe.
Okay, let me address this point. Firstly, modern medicine does not make your argument like sound. It doesn't prove your point, because with modern medicine we have a lot of modern problems as well, like the scholar mentioned, cigarette smoking, massive stress, and all of these things. Firstly, so this is not some be all and end all. Secondly, people living to long ages, this has happened throughout history. There is nothing unusual about this. Thirdly, let's take the average age, right? The average age supposedly, according to Hadith, it's 60 for the Ummah. Let's take it as an average age, and you can claim that because these average ages are 75, there is a problem. That contention still doesn't work. Here's a reason why. The reason the average age of Sunni scholar, average age of lifespan of people in general is so low is because of a massive amount of deaths in infancy, a massive amount of deaths in warfare, and etc. These scholars did not die in infancy. These scholars were not engaged in warfare, so their average ages would naturally be much higher than the normal average lifespan for these reasons. So, still, you don't have an argument, and just bringing up modern medicine does not help your case. You can respond.
I mean, all you're doing is saying, oh, it doesn't help your case. It literally does. And you're bringing up points about modern medicine not assisting this claim. And you're bringing up like cigarette smoking as a factor of decreasing lifespan within our time. When in reality, modern medicine helps with cigarette smoking and these addictions and these problems, and helps increase the lifespan, right? But 7th century Arabia, they also have problems too, health problems, right? The Prophet, I believe that there's a UN report talking about how there was an increase in malaria during the time of the Prophet, right? And there's even a theory that the Prophet died of malaria. Whether you consider that credible or not, it's not relevant. But
Okay.
look, just as our society has I'm not finished. Just as our society has problems with health, their societies have problems with health too. But we have ways of mitigating it through our health system.
Okay, I'll respond to this point. Firstly, you said that I'm not addressing your point and I'm just bringing up modern medicine, that it doesn't solve anything, and I'm picking up cigarettes. I am not doing that. Your argument is based on that the average age of Sunni scholars is much greater than average age of normal people. This is your argument. If this is not your argument, then again, explain later what is your argument. I'm dealing with this argument. The reason the average, and this is directly addressing the point about the average age of scholars. The reason the average age in general is so low is because of a massive amount of deaths in infancy. Malaria usually affects young kids. It can affect some older people, but generally it is a massive problem for young kids, right? And again, death in warfare was also a major reason for the average lifespan being so low. These are the reason average span in the Middle East was mainly so low, or Middle East, not Middle East in medieval times. These reasons cannot apply to these scholars. This is why their average lifespan would naturally be much higher than the average person. And this is the point even the Orientalists that you were using as an authority were making. This is why your argument doesn't work. Now, you said that we have benefits of modern medicine. Yes, we do. We also have problems with modern medicine. So this argument doesn't work. And bringing up malaria doesn't work. Most of the time that affects younger children. These scholars are not young children. These are older people. So it can affect old people in some cases. But again, you have to go by the general causes of malaria and how it affects people in general. Those are the kids, not older people. So again, you have no justification for your argument. You can respond.
Do you want to shift it maybe to an authority argument instead of authenticity, Jonathan? What do you think? Because I feel like this is getting nowhere with them.
Yeah, I mean, this guy just dismissing it and isn't even really dealing with it. So if you want to go to authority, that's fine.
Let me just make one point, since you brought up me dismissing this. I did not dismiss this. I directly addressed the average lifespan because that is what your argument is based on. So I'm not dismissing anything. You can make your argument.
All right, fantastic. We'll not move to another topic. You're Sunni, correct?
Yes.
And I assume you believe in the Hadith corpus as a source of religious law beside the Quran?
Can you repeat?
Do you believe the hadith sources? Hadith is a religious source of law beside the Quran.
Yes.
And so then, how do you resolve that with the Quran being complete?
I will address this point once, but after that I want to go to arguments for reliability of hadith because that is what I was more interested in debating. But I will address this point. The Quran is complete, but that doesn't mean the hadiths are not giving context to the Quran. And the reason for this is very simple. I think it's Surah 16, Ayat 44 or 45, where it mentions that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is supposed to explain the Quran. Again, the Quran is saying that hadith and words of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam are authoritative and are important. The Quran is saying this. Quran being complete does not mean that the hadiths are not needed. It doesn't mean that the Quran itself is saying that the hadiths are needed.
We believe the hadith are context to the Quran, correct? And they're explaining the verses.
They explain the Quran. They are context of. They give context to the Quran. They explain the Quran.
So what verse is the hadith explaining when it tells us when we go to the bathroom in the nature we have to use an odd number of stones?
The hadiths are supposed to give. Let me address this point. Yeah, let me address this point. The hadith is supposed to give context to the Quran, but it is not only just the context of the Quran. Do you understand this point, right?
Yeah. Okay, so then it's not only the context of the Quran. That was your argument.
No, I said the hadith gives context to the Quran. I never said it is only the context of the Quran. These are two different statements.
But it's not. If that's what you're claiming, then the hadith has to correspond with the Quran. And I'm showing you many hadiths are actually outside of the Quran.
I'm sorry, how you... what am I claiming and what is contradicting it? Because I think you're confused on this topic.
You're saying, I told you that the Quran is supposed to be the only source of religious law for our religion because the Quran is complete. And you say, yes, the Quran is complete. However, the hadith is simply giving context. It's just explaining the verses of the Quran. Now, my question is...
I did not say this.
What?
Let me make one thing clear. Your claim was that the Quran is complete and that means the hadiths are not needed. I gave one example of this, that Quran being complete does not mean that hadiths are not important. Right? I refuted that claim by quoting an ayat of the Quran. Now you are changing my words to mean that the only thing the hadiths are supposed to do is to give context of the Quran. That is not the case.
Okay, then tell me why the hadith is allowed to add to the religion when the Quran is complete. That's my argument.
Why not? Like, what's the issue
because
here?
The Quran is complete. We just agreed the Quran is complete, but you're saying from one side you're saying that yeah, it is complete, but the hadith is just giving it context. And on the other hand, you say, oh well, there are a lot of hadiths that actually are not in line with the Quran, that they're outside of the Quran. And so, well, what's the problem with that? Well, you just agreed
how
the
is
Quran
that
is complete.
Not in line with the Quran? How is the hadith about number of stones, right? How is that out of line with the Quran?
Can you connect it with the verse? What verse is it explaining?
Well, Quran says Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is supposed to be a role model, right? This hadith gives the ways in which he's a role model. Of course, Quran says this. Let me quote the ayat.
This is not explaining a book. Again, look, you're going outside of the Quran to establish something. This is not in line with the Quran. Again,
how is it not in line with the Quran? Look,
and why we use an odd number.
Okay, finish your point, then I'll make mine.
I asked you to give me the verse that is talking about going to the bathroom or something like that you can tie this verse with. You don't have that. What you're going to default to is to say, oh, we need to have the example of the Prophet. Sorry, someone telling me. Can someone continue?
Can I just respond to this point? Because you just finished your point, right? Let me respond to this. Okay, I'll respond to this point. Your claim is, and this is your entire argument, your claim is there is a contradiction between the Quran being complete and the hadith giving context to the Quran and explaining parts of the Seerah, such as, for example, the stone ones. Your claim is that there is a contradiction between these things. The Sunni position is there is no contradiction between these things. So Why should I take your position? Can you prove there is a contradiction? Because I don't see any contradiction here.
Okay. Is donkey meat haram?
Yeah, I think it is.
Okay. I will show you a direct contradiction. Okay, God willing. Let's look at this. Okay, let's look up the. Hold on here, brother. I'm not that versed, but at least I know what the truth is. So I'm going to look at this. Hold on here. Prohibitions. 394. God willing. Let's look at 394. EC1 chat. E. 394. Brother, look in chat. Read it to me, please. God willing.
I'll read the translation that I am seeing. Those who falsely fix lies upon Allah despite this are wrongdoing. This is 394.
Okay, so explain that to me. What does that mean?
Well,
Means
I don't know the
any
exact
prohibitions
context of this
mentioned in the
verse.
Quran.
I don't know about
Brother,
the
what?
Sahaba. I don't know the context of this verse.
You don't need to need the context. Words mean words, brother.
Okay, I'll read these words again.
Like,
Those
what
who
does the word
falsely
mean?
fix.
The only way, to give you an example, I came into this conversation with zero context, yet you understand exactly what I'm saying. So are you saying God, in his omnipotence, needs context for his words? That's silly.
How is that silly?
There's no context needed. What
How
does
is
the word
that
say?
silly?
What does the word say?
Here's the problem.
We could finish this easily. Okay, you read 394. Read the one I put up before Justin put 394. Right, 6145. Can you read that one, please?
Okay, one moment. But I was reading 394 because you guys asked to read 394. I didn't magically pick out this ayat. 6145.
But that's not the issue. The issue is the fact that you're asking for context of something that clearly is just clear state, cut and dry a statement.
How
You
is
don't
it
need
clear, cut,
context
and
for a
dry?
statement.
Here's the thing.
Brother, it's like
Let me-
hold
now
on.
let me
It's
address
like
this
saying
point.
grass
Look.
is green. And I'm like,
Okay,
what's the
finish your point.
context? What's the context if grass is green? There's no context needed. Grass is green. It's a statement. God is giving you a statement. There are no prohibitions after this. If you attribute them to God, you're wicked. Period. It's a statement. There's no context needed. It's
Can I
a
respond
full
now?
stop statement.
Justin, can I respond
Go
now?
for it, brother. Go for it, bro.
Okay, firstly, here's the number one problem with your claim. You are claiming that these things are obvious, that it is obvious that no context is needed. The problem is, for 1400 years or for 1300 years, no one has thought this is obvious. Only you think it is obvious. This is something that is not in your head. No one else thinks
Nobody
this is
can hear.
obvious.
Nobody
You
can hear you.
can now,
Your mic's cut out.
because of our disagreement, can you prove this is obvious? If you can't, you don't have an argument. You only have your feelings on this topic.
Your mic doesn't work. Nobody can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Okay, Hammer. Yeah, now we can hear you. We didn't hear anything.
Okay, let me
So,
respond to this. Let me just repeat. It won't take long.
Wait, hold on. Yeah, hold on. Let's start from the beginning. I gave you a statement of 394. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
And you're saying you're going to try to justify how this absolute statement, full stop, that needs zero context, needs context. Go.
I didn't say this particular. I mean, there should be context involved because there is a place, time, and place where this ayat was revealed. But I was making a general point regarding context. You are saying it is obvious. I hope you can hear me now. You are saying that it is obvious that these ayat, that the Quran in general needs no context. Here's the problem with that claim. That hasn't been obvious to Muslims for the past 1300 years. It's simply not obvious. It's just your assumption you are coming to the debate with. It's not obvious. It's not obvious to everyone else. It might be to you. It might be a subjective thing that you want to believe, but you can't claim this is
you're
obvious.
Not addressing the point.
Let me finish my
You're not
point.
addressing the point. You're just making excuses, and then secondly,
How am
you're
I
saying
making
you need
excuses?
context.
How am I
right?
not addressing your point?
So listen, Because yeah, he's saying that look,